Hey friends, so Ableton 12.2 is finally out, and that means that if you have Ableton Suite, you also have this awesome device called Expressive Chords. Now, I've seen a lot of really good Expressive Chords coverage already, so in this video instead, we're going to kind of explore how to use Expressive Chords in a workflow or songwriting context. And also, I'm happy to provide you with 12 additional Expressive Chord banks that you can use in your music, and the link to that is down in the description and comments. All right, let's do it. So a couple months back when the beta came out, I asked my friend Sam, who's also the keyboard player in my band Papadosio, to send me some chord progressions that I could use. And so between him and me, we've put together these 12 chord banks that I really think are awesome. And so, for example, let's grab this one. This one's called Sexy. So in case this is your first time seeing Expressive Chords, essentially it's a chord bank. And what that means is that there's a bank of chords that you can draw from, right? So there's all these different chords in this preset called Sexy, right? These chords kind of, to me, have like an FKJ kind of feel to them, right? But if you look at my hands down here, you can see that I'm just playing up the keyboard. And by playing chromatically, I can trigger these different chords. Now, what's interesting about this is that, of course, I don't have to play these chords in the order that they're presented. Like, if I played them sequentially, it's kind of a riff, right? Right? So what's interesting about this approach is that me and Sam are sort of collaborating in a completely new way. He's just sending me groups of chords that he feels like are interesting and they have a certain vibe and they go together, right? So you could think of all these different chord banks as like vibes, right? Something that's interesting, for example, is that our song called Zoom Out used a bunch of sus2 chords, right? The riff, I think, goes like... And the whole chord bank that he's provided here are a bunch of sus2 chords. So, you know, this is a vibe, right? It feels like a certain way. That's like the sus2 vibe, if you will, right? So maybe now let's look at like a workflow that you could use when you're messing around with Expressive Chords. So I'm gonna grab Ascending Jazz Hands. Here's another one. Sounds like this. Sounds pretty cool, right? So I have this beat right here. It sounds like this. So I think the first thing that you should try is just to jam around with your chord bank and try different combinations of these chords. Okay, cool. So I think I have an idea. So what I'll do is I'll go ahead and record this. Now what you're going to see recorded is not the chords. What you're actually going to see recorded is the keystrokes that I did to trigger the chords, okay? So check this out. Right? So you can see that those are just single notes. So the first thing I want to point out here is that Expressive Chords can help teach you music and music theory. I know, like music theory, it's so scary. What's nice about Expressive Chords is that if you switch it over to this view, you can actually see the chords that are being played. So check this out. So being able to see this chord that we've stopped on, this D major 7 right here, I can learn that that's a C sharp, an F, an A flat, and a C. Awesome. So look at that. You're actually teaching yourself how to play these chords. So, you know, a lot of people think, I saw a lot of comments when I made my Ableton 12.2 new features video, and people were like, why don't you just learn music theory or learn how to play the keyboard? Well, here's a good way to learn it. You know what I mean? You can actually look at this and you can understand, okay, wow. That's a D flat major 7. I actually have learned how to play that chord because I can see it displayed right here. So something else that I think is interesting is that you can copy an Expressive Chords instance in one track and put it in another track. So for example, I'll hold Option and I will drag it into this wavetable track. Sounds like this. Pretty sweet, right? But something else we can do is use an arpeggiator, and this can make a really interesting thing happen. Let's go ahead and make this a 16th. And maybe what I'll do is I'll just disable this track and I can play along with my drums, and now I have... right? I have an accompaniment of an arpeggiator. And another thing I should do, maybe I'll put it on 16th swing. And maybe another thing to do is to put this back on the first inversion. Right, and so we can hear that the notes aren't stepping on each other as much. The keys are now down lower, and the wavetable has an inversion that's higher. In fact, we could get these two instruments even farther apart from each other by transposing this up an octave. So, in my songwriting and composition course, we talk a lot about how mixing actually starts with composition, and keeping the ranges of your instruments separated from each other makes mixing a lot easier later. So that's what we're doing here. We're kind of keeping these instruments away from each other by having different inversions, right? And then, of course, different octave ranges. Let's see what this sounds like with the beat. Right, so now another thing I could do is go back to my keys over here and strum this a bit more to maybe exaggerate the sound. Now, another thing I could do, of course, is I could grab this. Let's go ahead and enable this clip, and I could hold Option and drag down and thus copy it. And so now we get this. So using an arpeggiator after an expressive chords is an interesting thing to do, because you can also use this offset control. And what this will do is this will start on the second note instead of the first note of the pattern. So now we get something interesting like this. Right? So let's maybe go with the highest note first. Super interesting combinations, right? By the way, I feel like I should point this out. This is a pretty cool tactic that I'm using on these drums. You might have been listening to these drums and being like, how is that sub happening? Well, something I thought of doing was using a drum bus with the boom control on the kick drum, and I'm actually just automating the boom control volume up and down. Essentially what the boom does is it just adds a low note, like a low sub note, that you can actually tune right here. And so I have it around a B. I probably should tune that up a little bit, yeah. So it's around a B right here, and it's kind of doing this doom, but then it goes away over time with this control. Comes back up. It's kind of a little fun thing to do there. Hey, so if you're learning something from this video and you enjoy the way that I teach, just so you know, I offer 4 different really in-depth courses on Ableton Live, and one of which is songwriting and composition. And this week I'm working on adding expressive chords to that specific course. All of my courses are consistently updated as Ableton rolls out new features, and as far as I know, they are the biggest and most thorough lessons that you can find on Ableton Live anywhere on the internet. When you enroll, you also get into our private Discord where you can ask me and other Ableton musicians questions and get answers in basically real time. My courses are super high rated for a reason, so if you're struggling to get your mixes to sound pro, or if you're struggling with using the software in any way, I highly recommend you checking out these courses. The link is down in the description. Okay, let's get back to the video. So maybe the last thing to talk about, I'll just go ahead and duplicate this track. Maybe the last thing to talk about is this. Let's grab, maybe I'll try the, substitute teacher. Okay, so let's go ahead and listen to this track. So the first 7 chords in here are what are called the diatonic chords. Essentially, all of these chords comprise of 99% of all the pop music you've ever heard. So your classic 4-chord songs are all in here, right? What's interesting is that I called this preset Substitute Teacher because what I've done is I've actually taken all of the major chords and made them minor, and all of the minor chords and made them major in the second half of this chord bank. So the first half sounds like this. Right, so that's the first 7 chords. The next 7 chords are the opposite. Or in other words, all the majors are minor and all the minors are major. So why on earth is this useful or important, Anthony? Well, something I can do is I can substitute one of the chords that I have in my chord progression and make it more interesting. Chord substitutions are really cool things to do to generate interest in your chord progressions. So here's my boring chord progression, right? What if I substituted this last one for a minor? So So now listen to this. Do you see how this is a different flavor? And so I can see on my Expressive Chords device, instead of an A major, I can see that it's an A minor. I can see visually why that makes sense or why that works, and I can learn from that, right? So it's just a cool way to kind of like learn in a weird and interesting backwards kind of fashion, right? Cool, so I know that this was sort of a departure from, you know, my normal like super deep dive video or whatever, but I think there's already really great coverage on Expressive Chords. I personally think that Expressive Chords opens up a whole new possibility for people that learn in weird ways, right? If you are kind of a backwards, reverse engineering kind of learner, you like to look at other people's sets and break them down, this is a great way to understand how chords work by simply having them provide you with a bank and then you kind of messing around with it. I also think that, you know, we sample music all the time. We download sample banks off the internet, right? Well, this is sort of a sample bank, but instead of samples, we're actually providing chord banks, right? Different collections of chords that you can reverse engineer into new musical material. I just think this is really cool and really interesting, and honestly, it's really fun. Even for someone like me who has been playing music for a long time, understands a fair bit of theory, like it's kind of fun to just open up my friend Sam's chord banks and rearrange them into something that I think is cool, and it's a really weird but awesome way to collaborate, right? Awesome. Well, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you like this kind of thing, like, comment, subscribe. You know what to do. Love y'all. See you next time.